So you just feed your ML like the data, and then it will figure out what models and what other things you need to, rather than you trying to figure out the models you're going to use.
Right. It's not going to be declarative. It's not going to be like, this is the way, but it's going to be like, here are some ways that worked well for these first attempts. You know, you'll see. Okay, I was just talking about how great this all is. 3 different ML problem spaces it can solve: classification, regression, and forecasting. Supports a lot of different types of data formats. Works with a lot of different types of compute. And I was going to show you. There's a cool demo as part of this. Yeah, here's the actual how all these run under the hood. They use these scikit-learn libraries. Super cool. Again, open standards. Microsoft's biggest competitor is old Microsoft, because Microsoft runs on so many open source technologies now. We love Linux. We love all these open source things, and we want to enable you to build in the ways that you like, right? And that's what Azure ML is all about. Enabling you to build models quickly, and then giving you the tools to be able to work with building models in your environments in the way that you already like.
Hey,
And you
Arthur,
can see, like, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but
All good.
the automated portion of the hyperparameter tuning, because I'll probably have a question on that with the Jupyter notebooks too, because I spent weeks on that stuff. That's really hard sometimes. And so, do you say that it gives you, like, for whatever problem you're solving, let's say a regression model, it will kind of optimize initially with some kind of hyperparameters? Perhaps not the best one, but
think of it this way, right? You're gonna give it the problem that you're trying to solve, and provided it fits into one of those 3 types of machine learning categories, you're gonna try running this pipeline, or try running a ML workflow in with AutoML, right? And then AutoML will be like, hey, these hyperparameters are some great starts, right? And you'll see, I think I have somewhere in this deck. You can also do AutoML with the Python Sdk. It's just calling the same web view in Azure ML. Yeah, okay. Let's talk about that more specifically. So to answer your question, generally what you're going to do is you're going to start with AutoML in the AutoML service view, right? And then try to solve your problem like that, and it will give you some, these are not terrible results compared to everything else. Right. It could be places to start. Yeah. So AutoML hypertuning, it's going to be running multiple parallel training runs, right? And it's going to be trying to run like, these sorts of parameters seem to work really well together. Let's try to run more variants on the specific configuration, right? It basically defines that like search space, like, oh, let's try these specific parameters, right? And then these transitions can get a little bit annoying. And you can see, like, a lot of these different types of models, it's going to be like, nope, all of these are terrible, kill them. And then it will give you a lot of different output models that are actually not terrible results. And then you can go take and work with, try deploying, try running in an environment that will give you the pickle file to run that model. And you can also take those parameters and go try to make that sort of model better.
So if I actually have like an idea of what I want to do,
yeah,
do I still need to use the AutoML?
You don't have to use AutoML at all if you don't want to use it. You can still use Jupyter notebooks. Like, frankly, I don't use AutoML that much, because most of the time when customers come to me for help, it's because they need help in Jupyter or Designer, right? They're usually like, AutoML is great. It's a great first step, but like, most data science orgs aren't spending all day in AutoML. It's a great starting point. And for people who are data science curious, I'm not going to dive into like what you'll see here. I'm probably going to speed past this. This is like quite literally definitions of how you deploy different Azure ML sort of services if you wanted to deploy it as code. I figured you guys would think it's pretty cool to see, because you can basically interact with the Azure ML environment straight from Jupyter notebooks, right? So rather than having to like manually pull in your data or write specific connection strings to be able to connect to Azure storage, they're going to abstract all that away from you, and the Azure ML environment is going to make that way easier, and still enabling your code first workflows. You can even run this on your own computer and then connect to that Azure ML cloud environment to run maybe the training step or run maybe the, we've made this model now deploy. So we're not going to spend a lot of time here. This is like how you would create a compute target, but you can see like it's quite literally defining all this with code for you, and you can do that very quickly as part of like your interactive Jupyter Notebook workflow. Uploading some data to the cloud, again, all through code. And I somehow hit another view. Training local models, training models on remote clusters, right? Make a directory for all these remote clusters. This is quite literally, this would all work together, provided you have the data, provided you have the Azure subscription, you'd be able to run all this and it would all work together. So really amazing stuff to be able to see, like defining a whole workflow from creating your Azure ML workspace to deploying a model in like probably what is 150 lines of code. I'm just going to fly through the rest of this. Yeah, so again, after you submit that job, it makes that image. It's going to scale if you maybe you got a remote compute cluster that's you're like, oh, it can auto scale to 8 nodes. And it's going to be like, and it's going to expand out to that. It's going to make all the outputs that are artifacts from your file or from your run or stuff that might not have worked right. And then you can monitor that run, see how it's doing both in the Azure ML portal and through the Python Sdk. And you can see all those results, of course. And you can register that model in your environment as something that can then be used or has multiple versions and then monitored once it's deployed in your environment. So there's the deployment step, right? It makes a scoring script, which is generally like hit this endpoint, hit against this model, give me a prediction result back. Very simple sort of stuff. Create an environment with all like the dependencies that your space needs. Create a configuration for like where you want to deploy this. And this is, in this case, it's deploying to Azure container instances, but you could just as well deploy it to Azure Kubernetes service, which will be harder to configure a little bit. Questions? This is a lot of information to dump on you in under 40 minutes. Yes. Is there any sort of like a dashboard interface for is that? I think there is some like advanced like monitoring to show like accuracy compared to like a trained data set. I'd have to get back to you on that answer.
Yeah, the Azure ML Studio has a specific module that allows you to compare different algorithms, or even the same algorithm with different parameters.
Right.
And it's specifically set up to do that. I can't remember what it's called anymore, but there's that. Is that what you were asking?
Right. Did I see another hand? Yes.
Simple question. In terms of the ML workspace, right? Is that similar to the Synapse workspace?
Yeah, it's just like that. We're actually, I don't want to spend too much longer on the presentation because we're probably running out of time. I think that was actually the end of the presentation. I had some spare slides.
Only 90 spare slides?
You know, when you like put stuff together and you're like, oh, I might need this, right? But so you just saw everything about our high level, everything about deploying Azure ML models, everything about Azure ML, tiny bit about Synapse, tiny bit about talking about Power BI and how it integrates there, a lot about deploying models end to end and what that's involved. How are we feeling? How are we doing? We have thumbs ups, thumbs down. How about angry, or no, how about happy face is I'm overwhelmed. Yes.
So where this level is versus, I don't know where everybody else is, but between where I am and this level, there's a huge gap.
Mhm.
What's like a good place to start? Just go play in Azure, or is there some
So
lower side?
that is a great question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes. Do we have 15 minutes?
Oh, yeah, you got another hour if you want it.
Okay, I don't want to go over on people's timeline. I know we ended up at like 7:15, 7:30 last time, but all right. We'll go as deep as we want to with demos, and I'll basically show you how to deploy Azure ML. I'll show you at least one of our demos, but they're all public demos, and you can easily go play around and test with those. Does that sound good, or do you want something more fundamental?
Yeah, fundamental.
Okay. I'm going to show you how to.
It's actually more like homework.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What courses,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
websites, what thing in Azure should I follow? What VCAMs are out there, like on the Microsoft side or something?
Yeah. There are actually Microsoft Learn. There's a lot of great modules. I will send. I will show you some of them today. I will send as a follow-up these modules that you should use as like a reply to the meetup. And ideally, we'll either go through one of those or go through one of the labs for Azure ML today.
Yeah, I think there's a Microsoft class. If you go to like Microsoft.
Channel 9? Is it Channel 9?
No, if you
Or-
go to like Microsoft website,
Okay.
there's a class and they, training or something like that. They have it.
And literally, I mean, the Power BI tie-in here is maybe if you have premium, it's probably the dirt simplest way to get introduced to AutoML.
Yeah.
You take your data flow, you click the brain icon, and go. I mean, it's literally that simple.
That's very true.
I was also wondering what certs this.
Oof. All right, so we're gonna do a little bit of ad hocing here right now. Give me 1 second. I just want to pull up the right web browser where I could deploy an Azure ML environment. Okay, and the only reason I say the right web browser means I'm logged in with my Microsoft credentials, my corporate credentials, so I can actually deploy something. That was the only nuance there. But what was the question?
Well, there were a few, but I was asking about what certs.
Oh, certs, yes.
covers Azure ML.
So there's a few. There's Azure. There's an AI track, which is more focused around cognitive services, which is another domain of Azure AI that we haven't even talked about today. And then there's another track that is specifically for or more focused around machine learning. I think that's the data science track. Yes, I took that exam. I should know.
DP100.
I did pass, yeah. DP100 is the data platform one. I think it's DS100 or DS900. Azure Data Science Cert. You might be right. I think it's DP100. Okay, yeah, you're right. Yes, it's DP like 700 now for the data engineer one. So DP100, if you work for the company that uses Microsoft products, there's a good chance that you'll be able to take this for free or for a discount. So highly recommend getting this cert because it will force you to learn. Like I'm actually really bad about taking certs in a sense of I will take them almost going in cold. Right, like almost having studied not at all. Yeah, if I pass, I'm like, great, I know this stuff already. If I don't, I'm like, okay, this is what I need to study. Obviously, that's not super easy if it's $165 for you, but ideally, a lot of corporate organizations will discount that or pay for it.
Sandeep, you have your hand up? Or was that from earlier?
Yeah, no, I do have a question, and maybe you'll cover it, but in terms of like building a model, do you recommend with Azure that you kind of consolidate all your data into one spot instead of kind of trying to do it all in the notebook?
That is a great question. That is the biggest thing I tell my customers is that above all else, you need a data lake. And by data lake, I mean any sort of static cloud hosting service, i.e. something like Azure Storage, Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. Don't use Gen 1. If you're on AWS, something like S3, use that service, right, to centrally ingest all of your data into, and then you can put like access control lists over and network protections over and everything, right? And then that can be the central point of integration into all your other downstream systems, especially for an analytics workload. You want all your data together or in like the same sort of tooling. I work with a lot of organizations that like, you know, one half of the organization is allowed to look at this data and another half of the organization is allowed to look at others. So there might be some like policies separating some of the data, but at the end of the day, you want to centralize it in as few data lakes as possible so that it's very easily accessible and people can pick it up, work with it, and use it for all their projects, right? And build machine learning models off of it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Actually, one more nuance to that, and that is that, do you recommend like a flat table or something like that? I mean, I guess it would depend on how many models you're trying to build, what kind of different use cases you have, but you know, like, because as a first step, sometimes what I'll do is you'll take some data and you'll get some preliminary analytics, and then you'll use that to make a prediction. So you might be joining a bunch of tables and so on in a notebook. A little bit messy, but I think you think that you kind of should have some of that done. So when you actually start building the model, you've got like a flat table that has all your features and stuff, and then you know what your variable is.
Yeah. Absolutely. When you reach Azure ML, you want your data to be relatively clean or like in a standardized format or basically ready for doing machine learning on, right? You don't want to have to deal with any of the parsing steps or the, you know, combine all these 8 billion data sets together to make this data set that's ready for ML. You want to handle all that in Synapse or another like Spark sort of environment or your ETL environment and get that like last mile of data that you know you're going to be predicting and training on. To, you know, then integrate and, you know, make a model off of and then run on a container, right?
Okay, so do your EDA, your cleanup and all that stuff, you're
In Synapse.
ahead of time.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, data science environments, especially tools like Dask, are not great at actually like parsing and processing, working with data in ways like Spark and Pandas are, and you know, whatever dedicated ETL tools you already have. So you want to lean on those as much as possible. Am I losing anyone? This all making sense?
Yeah, I think that's what you mentioned earlier. The ML is the last step, right? There's
Right.
For Delta Lake, there's on the Synapse, maybe use the Azure Data Explorer. Those are all the tools, right, to give you
Yeah.
understanding the data.
Exactly.
And build the model on top of this is last mile, which is kind of.
80% of your work is going to be in cleaning up the data.
Exactly.
Right. You know, now that you say that, maybe we should have started with Synapse.
We can have you back, Arthur.
Exactly. So let's take a trip, unless there are other questions. I still see a hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's mine. I'll just take it out.
Okay. So what you're seeing is the Azure portal landing page. You will see this if you type portal.azure.com in your tenant. I'm assuming you guys aren't necessarily familiar with Azure. I'm sure a lot of you are. But this is just like the landing page when you're deploying stuff on Azure. And this is my personal, or not my personal, my like work subscription on Microsoft with all the resources that I've deployed for myself to play around and test with, right? So let's take a look and let's just go deploy an Azure ML environment. So all you got to do is you type machine learning. You don't type Azure machine learning, it won't come up. I'm still salty about that. Let's make a new resource group. Let's say it's AJD demo ML. Just like resource group is just an association of all your different resources in one centralized place for like maybe like a billing unit or a logical organization unit. I usually have like a set of apps that are related in one resource group, and maybe like different domains for different teams. They might go in different resource groups or even different subscriptions. And subscription is the billing unit. Any questions before we keep going? We're going to make a workspace. And again, remember, this is the most important piece of Azure ML because it is where Azure ML is deployed. It is the environment where Azure ML is, right? But it relies on several other resources. Remember, it relies on 5. I'm not going to make you recite them now because they're right here. there's obviously deployed in a specific region. Azure has a lot of different regions across the United States, across the world, where you could deploy Azure services, right? Then you'll have a storage account. Again, that's going to be associated with like where all your notebooks are. That's going to be associated with your base storage, right? If you don't want to have to deploy another storage, you can just use the one that comes with Azure ML. Key Vault, again, for secrets, it's just putting in random strings past there. You could give it your own name, or you can use one that you already have if you feel like, but I'm just going to make it as simple as possible just for the sake of this demo. Application Insights, same sort of idea. Container Registry, let's make a new one. Let's say it is AJD Demo CR. I'm very inventive. Oh, not allowed dashes. It's annoying thing about Azure sometimes is that you will deploy stuff and then it isn't support, or like your one naming convention works for one thing and one naming convention won't work for another. If you're in an enterprise environment, there's a good chance that you'll have to deploy this with private endpoints. This is beyond the scope of this discussion, but this is like private networking and definitely something to consider. And I'm always happy to answer questions about, because I've done this a lot, and it isn't the most pleasant thing when you're doing private networking. So definitely need any help, reach out. Cool. So the information is out there, but if you need guidance, I'm always here. This is all like advanced stuff. I wouldn't worry too much about this. These are some of the newer features with Azure. You can see there's like customer managed keys so that Microsoft, if, you know, when you have your data on a cloud environment and say your company's doing something illegal and the government's like, all right, we'd like to subpoena this. If you have a customer managed key, then you actually, like, Microsoft won't be able to decrypt the data, right? With a Microsoft managed key, they'd be able to decrypt the data. That also means that if you lose the key, Microsoft can't recover it for you either. So it's an additional layer of security, makes it so that we can't decrypt the data for you, but you better not lose that key. And then high business impact just means you're not going to be monitored as much if you're like, oh, this has super proprietary information. We don't want Microsoft peeking. This is just for tags. If you want to like assign a billing unit to it or like tag it as like ML stuff. And now all of the validation pass. What's actually happening behind the scenes as we do this is that Microsoft is deploying this thing called an Azure Resource Manager template. It's called an ARM template that will take all these services and tell Azure, I need you to go deploy all these pieces for me. And you can see it's already started to deploy some of these services, like a storage account that we're going to need for all this storage for files and stuff, like Key Vault for your vaults and secrets. Like, don't know what the component service is, but I'm sure it's important. Container Registry's up, and now it's deploying Azure ML. See how it did Azure ML last? Because it needs all those other ones first. And this probably will take a minute or two. You guys could have done that just like that in no time. Obviously, it would take some planning and strategy at an enterprise scale, but it's that easy to get started exploring Azure ML. And it finished before I could even stop trailing off. We can go to the resource. Okay. You can see it opens this separate window and it will take us to the magical Azure Machine Learning Studio. Whoa! Oh, here we are. We made it.
You have to create a resource group before you can get there.
The resource group is part of the deployment. So you can actually go straight to, once you've made that service, ml.azure.com, and it will actually bring up all the Azure ML environments that you have. And in this case, I have these 3 Azure environments that I've worked on, right, that are in my tenant. This one is specifically for us that we just deployed. So what you're seeing is this Azure ML environment that you just saw me deploy 5 seconds ago. Here is Azure ML. You can see a lot of the core themes that we talked about are here. All of your friends that you've known from the beginning of this presentation are back. You can see stuff like notebooks. Oh, look, it already made a folder for me. I can get started creating a new file. I'm going to make a demo.ipynb, and we can get started in Jupyter, right? You'll see that we'll have to connect to a compute at some point, but I want to associate that with the demo, so we'll talk about that in a minute. You can see here we've got automated ML. That you can set up an AutoML run against specific data sets. I have on Microsoft Docs 3 different demos ready to go. And again, I'm trying to use public stuff, make sure it's accessible to people who want to pick it up later. Forecast demand with Azure Machine with AutoML. I have train a no-code regression model in Designer, and I have. That's not what I want. I actually think it's a GitHub link. Yes, train a machine learning model using Azure ML service is a GitHub one. This is actually using the Jupyter environment. So it is down to you. Which one do you want to do? Vote now on your phones. How about we start with a AutoML environment, because I feel like that's going to be the easiest to get onboarded and get familiarized with, just because it has the fewest prerequisites. So I'm going to try to be reading this, or not, I'm not going to read it out loud, but I'm going to try to make this as easy to follow along as possible. Pause me, stop me if you're like, Arthur, this is a terrible demo, I hate you. You can pause me, right? Let's dive in. So, quick start, create workspace. Oh, nope, not that one. We actually just did that, the quick start of creating the workspace resources. Let's take forecast demand with AutoML. All right, prereqs, we need an Azure ML workspace. Lucky for us, we just made one. Download the BikeNo CSV data file. All right, let's download that from GitHub. I think there's an easy way to do that on GitHub. I did copy that at some point. I think there's a way to download. I can just download the actual download zip. We'll download that so that we can then use it in AutoML.
GitHub just frustrates the heck out of me trying to download an individual file.
Yeah, it's not easy.
I want to punch it.
You guys can't see that, right? Okay, I'm just extracting the file.
That's the most frustrating.
Yeah,
I haven't figured out when it appears and when it doesn't appear. Sometimes it's there.
Sometimes it takes, I guess, to copy paste.
Sorry, I had to vent.
it should be so much easier. Automated machine learning. I'm actually doing something in the background, but I'm just trying to talk to fill the air and make you realize that I'm not just ignoring you all. You all are wonderful. All right, so we are in the environment and we have the BikeNo CSV. We're signed into the studio, so that's all good. We have that ready to go. Now we want to create a data set. And you'll be like, I remember the word data set from when we were talking about this. So we're going to create and load the data set. We're going to create data set from local files. What are we going to call it, Mr. Guide? We are going to call it basic info. Okay, it just wants us to give it a name. Bike no data set, not Buick no data set. That'd be a little, we don't need more Buicks right now. I like Buicks. Workspace blob store. So basically what it's saying is where are we going to be putting this data store? You can't keep the data set on your local machine. You could, it's a little bit of extra effort. We're just going to upload that data set to blob to make that an easy connection for our Azure ML environment to work with. Let us upload that file. And
when they're using the word data set here, they're not using it in the same context
No.
as the Power BI data set.
Totally different.
I just want to make sure.
Great clarification there. Now that it's prompted me for this, I need to go find the link again. Maybe I can drag and drop. That would be easier. We're all learning something new today. Nope, can't do it that way. All right, so this is going to take me a second. I guess I should have had this one ready to go, but who knows? We could have been talking about something else. Where's this? Okay, yep. How to use Azure ML, automated machine learning, forecasting, bike share, bike no CSV. All right, so there's the bike information. We're going to skip data validation because I'm not worried about it. And then we're going to go next. And now we are uploading this. Let's see if the guide gives us any additional guidance here. Data store file section, select the default data store. Yep, we found the file. Verify the settings. Limited, UTF-8, delimited, UTF-8. All things look great. How many headers? All files have same headers. Skip rows, none. Okay. Schema. We ignore the casual and registered columns. So we can ignore those. That's in the schema page. So we ignore casual. Yep. And what was the other one?
Registered.
Registered. Thank you. I think it said something about CNT. Okay. Yeah, it's just a breakdown of each. Leave the defaults for the properties and type. Looks good. Oh yeah, I see properties and type defaults. Yep. And we want to create. Yeah. All right, we're good. Confirm all these details. We are good to go. Now it is creating that data set. Now we have a data set to work with for this AutoML environment. And you can see, I could give you a little bit of a detour if I just take you to the storage account and see the containers, and we look at blob store, whatever, UI, bike no. So under the hood, what the UI was doing for us was that it was uploading all that to a specific folder on the Azure ML blob storage. Does that make sense?
So can you move like a file from blob storage to another blob?
Yeah, absolutely. You just would have to register that in Azure ML as a data store that it can monitor, and then just point it to the right location, right? I'll show you how to do that in a little bit.
Azure File Explorer is a great tool for that.
Or Storage Explorer.
Storage Explorer.
Yeah.
Sorry, correct.
It is a great tool. All right, so click here to go to the data set. All right, so I think we just need to go hit the AutoML again, new automated ML. Yeah, there it is. Bike no data set. We click on that. We selected that. And now it's going to do a run for us. We've got to follow the guide. Pop it, the configure run form as follows. Okay, so see here's all these terms that we've been talking about actually becoming real a little bit, right? We have Azure ML bike run, Buick. Wow, my mind's on Buicks. Bike run, or bike share, they want me to call it. Can't stop typing Buick. We want to select CNT as the target column, which is what we want to predict. Right. And we want to create a new compute. And again, this is where all these terms start to come real. You can see it's like, oh, what sort of compute are we going to use? We are going to use a compute cluster. Does it say compute cluster? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just like, hey, can you actually make something for me? We want a dedicated CPU standard DS12v2. Standard DS12v2. So it's got a lot of RAM, doesn't have a ton of cores. 37 cents an hour, you can see. It said CPU, right? Yep. Okay. So see, there are options for GPU environments. See, there are options for a lot of different virtual machines. There are a ton here in this list that you could deploy to. We're not going to worry about that right now. We're just going to select what Microsoft is telling us to do. But you can see how like different use cases would warrant different sort of VMs. You see, we've selected DS12v2. That is it, right? All right. Again, live demos are hard, guys. I'm doing my best. We want to select this to be the bike compute. I love that. Just for biking. We want 1 to 6 nodes, so we just say 1 to 6. How about we actually do 0? Yeah, because it's warning me that like, hey, you'll be constantly charged for this. Let's do 120 seconds to scale down, which means that if this cluster is like, it stops getting requests, it's going to scale down to the minimum number of nodes over a span of time. Why you'd want to change this setting? Arthur, like, do I want this to be 2 minutes? Do I want this to be 30 minutes? If you're a data scientist working on an intense project, you're going to be like, you're going to be watching this for a few hours. You'll have it open for a few hours and you'll see that it failed partway, like 3 hours in, and you'll be like, oh, I need to catch it while the compute cluster is still on. You rerun it, you don't have to wait for it to spin back up. It will take like 5 minutes to spin up, most likely. So get excited for that wait time, guys. We got advanced settings. We don't need to do anything there. Get to the compute target. Give that a quick minute to. Creating's easy. Actually spinning up is what takes time. Come on. It's always the hot seat. I did this earlier today and it was like that. Questions while we wait for it to hit the create button?
I think the Automl is great, actually. It's a machine learning on top of the machine learning, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and particularly if you're doing the statistic models, which is pretty decent.
Right.
If you're doing the more of a deeper learning, other stuff, supervised one may be different, but this unsupervised one, regression, you can compare all kinds of algorithms, which give you pretty good results if you want to use low-hanging fruit.
Right, exactly.
Incorporate it into your apps or something, right?
Exactly. Since it seems like it's taken a little while. All right, so it is actually creating this. It's just being slow.
And I always, I mean, if you're looking for low-hanging fruit to solve, I always recommend starting with a classification.
Yeah.
Those are typically like the easiest to start to get your hands dirty with the Azure ML and that stuff. And then you can graduate to recursion and anomaly detection and how rapid if you really get good at it. And I didn't make that up, by the way. It's actually an algorithm about how rapid.
It's even saying this will take a couple minutes. So I guess we have to wait. Sam.
Don't know where we are, but I think the Visual Studio has a AutoML builder. I don't know if it was previewed for a while. I have not looked at it yet, but I don't know where it is. But it's pretty close to somewhere if you're trying to generate downloaded code or something.
Right. Yeah, I honestly, I exist mostly outside of like a lot of the Microsoft tools. Like Storage Explorer I use all the time. Power BI Desktop I use once in a while, but I'm not a super deep Power BI guy. That's Greg. And yeah, most of my stuff is on Azure or on like the tools and services there, or on Git.
Well, this is cool because I don't think anyone has ever actually presented on Azure ML here. We've covered AutoML to a certain degree, and of course we covered Machine Learning Studio because that's what we had back in the day.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, so I don't think anyone's ever actually presented this to the group.
You know, maybe a few months from now, we can always be like, we want to do a deep dive on notebooks.
Yeah, you mentioned Machine Learning Studio. Is this something Azure Machine Learning, something new, just fairly new?
It's weird.
It's newer than Machine Learning Studio.
Yeah. Right. There's the machine learning service of yesteryear, which was just like a drag and drop workflow.
I took the DP100 6 months ago. I don't remember any of those screens at all.
You might have seen
Like Azure Studio, I mean, yeah, Machine Learning Studio, whatever that one, I think it is. But
those. Yeah, Machine Learning Studio Classic.
Yeah, something, the Costco right now.
Yep.
I saw something was being retired. Is that being retired at some point or no, or?
I think like long term it is. I'm not 100% sure on that. Don't quote me on that. That's just me speculating.
That's where I built my first machine learning experiments was in Machine Learning Studio with You know,
Drag and
it's
drop,
very
yeah.
similar concepts to what we're covering here. It's
Yeah,
just maybe a little more graphical. You don't have Jupyter notebooks. You're dragging and dropping data sets and algorithms, and you're wiring them together, kind of like an SSIS package, if you will.
Yeah. Actually, if you look at the Azure Synapse, the same thing, right? It's Azure Synapse equals ADF plus SQL plus Databricks, kind of, right? Because it's still have individual Databricks or Azure Data Factory, but this one's kind of everything, right? Put together, create a new platform, right? For the pipeline, right? Serverless, like the cluster exploring kind of.
Right. Yeah, while we're waiting for Azure ML to get some compute, I could show you one of my most favorite platforms and kind of how this all integrates together. We have Azure Synapse, and Synapse is deployed in a similar way. This is one that I already have. You can see this could be its whole own talk at some point, but I'm mostly killing time. I do want to show you Synapse. If you've ever used Data Factory, it has a lot of the functionality that Data Factory has, or it has all of it. And you can build pipelines, right? And of course, now we're going to be loading. No, it's not going to take forever. It might actually be a UI thing. Oh, I know what's happening. It's syncing with Git because Git is tied to this account. So it's going to my GitHub environment and it's making sure that all of these are actually like real entities that exist.
So if you had your pipeline, all of this set up in CI/CD pipelines that decisions can be made.
Mhm.
Is that offered also? So I'm interested in statistical process control and then rule making with this. Can you say do something to whatever is producing the data as like a trigger off what happens with the ML?
Right, yeah, exactly. So this is a huge orchestration layer that you'll see right here. So you can trigger really anything off of anything that's orchestrated by this. So let's say we had a really simple workflow where we copied data, and I'm not going to fill all this in. I'm just showing you like logically, right? We could take all these data sets, and take a source data set in a data lake. We could sync it to like clean it up. Then we could use Synapse Spark. And again, not going to talk about what Spark is, but it's a data transformation tool, right? And then from there, we can be like, all right, now that the data is cleaned up, let's go run that on Azure ML, on an Azure ML pipeline, right? And then based on the Azure ML pipeline trigger, now that Azure ML has run, maybe copy that data, maybe go run. I had a cool idea. Where was it? I thought there's some like streaming services that this can integrate with as well. But yeah, for the sake of this diagram, right? Like you can chain any of these activities together, make them event driven off. These all have HTTP endpoints that can be reached, like these pipelines. You can trigger these pipelines by any tool that you want, and be like, hey, now that I've hit this HTTP endpoint, trigger this machine learning run, or trigger all these data copy activities, then this machine learning run, right? So it really is an orchestration layer that can be called upon and called out to and then monitored as one centralized tool. And Azure Synapse is a lot of things. What you're seeing right now is called Azure Synapse Pipelines.
But it's the same thing as the data factory pipeline.
It's exactly the same, yes.
There's machine learning and data factory.
Yep. Synapse pipelines and Azure Data Factory they are not 1-to-1, but they are like 1 to 0.99. They're very, very, very similar. I'm starting to get skeptical that this is ever going to exist.
So now in your use case, so you're talking to PLCs, right?
So there's a data flow that, okay, so I got stuff in the field, there's a data flow. I want to pull that data, push to Azure, and then run rules on it. So predictive analytics, so we could check if there's certain characteristics of the data that result in X.
Yep.
Turn it off, switch it to something else, do some preventive maintenance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, preventive maintenance is one of the classic machine learning problems, right? I mean, it's one of the classics because there's a huge upside to it as far as cost-wise and value-wise to the business. Yeah, so in your case, something like Azure Synapse or Azure Stream Analytics would be another one that, you could go, and that has hooks into machine learning. But really what you're doing, and I've demoed this before, where once you get a machine learning model built and you publish it, it has APIs that you can call, right? And have it make predictions for you. So, I mean, once you're there, everything, you basically call it from anywhere. The demo that I used to run was that I would actually have, during my refresh from my Power BI data set, part of that would go make a call to Azure machine learning model that I built.
Right.
And then come back and I get a prediction. So for each row, and then I can, that comes right into my Power BI data set and I can report on it.
So there's two ways of thinking when we talk about Azure ML scoring and like predicting, right? When we talk about predictions on Azure ML, there's the batch predictions where you have like, I've got this huge data set that I'm like, I want predictions on all the fields in this, and I'm just going to send that to Azure ML. It's going to process that and it's going to output it somewhere. And great job. Take your time, do this in 20 minutes, right? Or do it in 10 minutes, depending on how massive the data is, right? Then, and that can all be done with compute clusters and like compute instances right here. So these two. And along with a few others. Inference clusters are what is like, you have a model, go run that permanently, run that as a service that has an exposed HTTP endpoint. And then you can be like, okay, I'm just going to hit this and ask for predictions for like one event or a few events at a time. So it's basically the difference between and Azure ML actually does a pretty good job of showing what these are about, right? It has both real-time endpoints, which is what we just talked about with like, let's score these very few things, or let's run a batch endpoint where like, hey, I just need all these data predicted on, and then so I can go integrate them into the next step in my service or the analytics. Yeah,
so one example on this is that we got into one of the first machine learning models that we built for commercial enterprise. Fusion was actually for a pizza place which will remain nameless. But anyway, whose food we may be eating tonight. But what we did was we built a model for them to predict what customers were not going to order again. Because they knew that if a customer ordered twice, then they would be with them for life. They would continue ordering with them over a long period of time. And what they wanted to know was to be able to predict the people that wouldn't call them. Built them out a machine learning model and did that for them. And then every day they would run, they would collect the data on the customers, and they would run it through the machine learning algorithm, get back prediction on whether, and with a probability of whether they're going to call again. And then like the top 10 customers, they would call them and, make sure that their meal arrived on time and offer them discounts if appropriate and that sort of stuff. And by doing that, they increased the retention for those people like 60% or something. It was crazy. So it was great, success story, and then rolled it out nationwide to all their stores. But that's also where you can get it modeled, right? Because all your historical information, you've built the model and then trained the model on all your historical information. But now, over time, you're taking the top 10 people that were likely not to call, and they're calling again. They become repeat customers. And so that's where you can get into things like model drift, where over time, as you get better, in terms of retaining those high probability people, then your model starts to be wrong, right? And you got to retrain it. I'm just trying to kill time, Arthur.
Yeah, I'm waiting for it.
If you have a rule very specific, you don't need the machine learning. Basically, it's very clear to you, right? Rule based. One way measurement, like something is a roughly right, probability. Okay, when this kind of machine gonna fail, probably likely in the days or something. That's where the score come into the machine. It's like a fuzzy thing. It's not very clear. But if you do have a hard rule, you can always direct them. Also, you mentioned like the stream analytics. Also, you can do windowing, aggregation stuff. If anomaly, those kind of things to take action, come back to a little bit more like IoTH, back to your device.
Feel for Arthur, by the way. And no matter how many times you do a demo, right? I mean,
It's always like that.
it when you actually do it, it'll screw up. And I actually solved one of the reasons why this would happen. I was giving AutoML demos. I was giving AutoML demos that had access to a premium capacity for the MVPs, and I would run through the demo the night before, I'd run through it the day of. It didn't matter, 50-50, it would just completely and miserably fail. And then I found out that it was other MVPs going in and messing with the tenant settings, and that's
That's
why
so
sometimes
funny.
it worked, sometimes it didn't. It was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Well, I'm getting bearish on the ability of doing this demo right now.
Sometimes the US, East US, it's a hotspot.
Yeah, that it is.
Do you have a machine learning studio that you can show them?
Yeah, I do. I'm trying to upload data to it, and actually here is one actually. Yeah, leave this. This is the one that I use for like a lot of testing in like my environment, and it's saying that I'm not allowed to connect to it over the public internet, which has changed. So, great things have happened today. None of them good. And but yeah, we have I guess the better testing environment is maybe if I could show you a compute instance, but this is all like boilerplate silly stuff that breaks on us, of course. I'll be sure to get you guys a couple demos over and training over to make sure that you actually get to try this out, actually get to see it in action, and send you a few videos that Microsoft has made of these demos. So I apologize for the inconvenience, but what can we do with live
You'll
demos?
post in the meetup then?
Yeah, that's what I'll do.
What about this one that we're doing, three of them? Can you send the link? Can we do it?
Yes, all three of these are public URLs, and I'll make sure that you can, I share all of them with you. All right. Oh, actually, no, this is something else that I wanted to talk about with you as a new thing. Where is it? We had this. Yes, it's over. It's none of these. Yes, I will find those tutorials, the designer tutorial, the one that we were doing on AutoML, and there are a lot of demos that we have that I was pulling off Git for Azure ML for notebooks. So definitely, I'll get all of those over to you guys.
And we do have a question from remote. Is there always a cost associated or just with larger, more complex data sets, one to play around without having to ask permission? Now, I mean, you can answer on the machine learning, on the Azure machine learning side. I know in the Azure Machine Learning Studio Classic that there's a free tier essentially, and you can actually detect up to 10,000 requests or something like a month or something like that. That's still free.
Right.
So I mean, anyway. You can answer from the Azure Machine Learning side.
The easiest ways to test are if you're a new Microsoft customer, or like if you're just trying to play around with this on your own, or like you're trying to get certs to maybe change jobs or something. The best thing you can do is to use the free Azure credit that Microsoft gives you, and sometimes Microsoft even gives your organization like $150 recurring of VS credit, which can be applied to Azure. So you can definitely play around maybe in your own subscription with credit that either your corporate environment has given you because of that perk, or because of the free $200 credit. But you do have to sign up with actually, I don't know if you need a credit card for the first $200. You have to confirm me on that, but yeah. So if you can get started, you can play around with a lot of this just in your own personal environment on Azure.
I can add it to, since actually, if you follow the Microsoft and learn, there are a lot of lab which is free. They actually have a special free subscription. You can run them maybe like 4 hours, depending on the 2 hours. I've been doing a lot of them. Basically, you can rerun them. You have a 10 like session per day or something.
Right.
Plenty of stuff you can play, but you have to go to the specific,
You have to go to
labs available. It's not always but if you follow the topics, generally you're gonna find quite a few sessions.
Right.
Recently I've been doing a lot of like SQL Server. I know there's tons of stuff give to you free, and also recently has a streaming analytics stuff. They have a particular lab give you a lot of. Basically, you don't spend anything, money wise, but you can play all kinds of stuff. They give you all those details. GitHub, code there. It's great. Actually, Microsoft spent a lot of effort on this one. for people to learn. It's really great.
Yeah, MS Learn is one of those places of new Microsoft that is really, really good. I think MS Learn modules we actually are assigned internally that we have to do a ton of MS Learn modules because it's the best way to learn a lot of this stuff, along with, maybe doing a cert at the end.
Yeah, it's really, I've been really impressed with them actually, because I've been doing a lot of training on Dynamics 365. The labs will spin up an entire D365 environment for you to mess around with and do the lab in. So we have another question. Also, a way to connect to live Power BI data set, or you need to export from PBI tabular model, then upload. So I think she's asking about, can you create you're gonna have to answer this one. Because I don't know.
Connecting from Power BI, like pulling a data set from there.
No, I think she's saying she's got her Power BI data set published to Power BI, and then she just wants to go into Azure Machine Learning and say, hey, my data set's over there. So they get
I like where you're going with that. That functionality does exist with Synapse. You can work with Power BI data sets inside of Synapse, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Which is really, really cool. Maybe a different day's demo. But that, I don't believe you can communicate it with it as like a dedicated data set in Azure ML as of today.
Yeah, but then you can do it in Synapse and you just put it as part of a pipeline and
Right.
push it out.
Exactly.
Makes sense to me.
I think actually,
Hopefully that is true, because there are a lot of people talking about how to get the data out of the Power BI, because Power BI has ETL capability, which is do a lot of stuff. But what I've learned was that you consume that data set for whatever reasons inside of the Azure space, which is great, all right? If you use the Power Apps stuff, you can consume those data sets. But if you want to get out of them somewhere, as you use Power BI as a pipeline,
Right.
I'm not exactly sure of that part, because there's a couple of add-ins there talking about how do you connect them, right? You mentioned plugging, how to extract that data into somewhere else.
Well, once you go to premium, you got your XMLA endpoint. Then you.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, but before that one, I guess you can consume them in the many of the apps of the of the Azure, but you may not be able to just get that data as a pipeline to push it back to your. Often there's a write back, right? If there's would be great if you do a little bit more write back to the database. Somehow you can cycle through the one, right? Kind of feeding back it forced. And that way you could do a lot more on the Power BI side of.
Yep. Any other questions for Arthur?
and yeah, I'm always happy to answer these questions at any of these meetups or even after as emails. Email me at arthurdooner, ARTHURDOONER @microsoft.com. And I might not respond within the first day, but I will see it and I will respond to it.
He does respond to emails. I can confirm. Thank you, Arthur. I really appreciate it. Those are great. And there'll be a recording later on that I'll get out there. I missed the first part of the presentation because I forgot to start the recording. So I failed in my duties. I got it eventually. It's got all the demo stuff and everything else as part of that. So really appreciate you coming in and meeting with us and laying down all this good stuff.
Yeah, and hopefully someday we'll be able to show you it all working together. Thanks y'all for joining.
Okay, so number one thing is PowerPoint downstairs. Once I get the pizzas put away, take a pizza. They delivered it twice. So take a pizza, take a salad, take the food. Otherwise, there's going to be a huge stack of pizzas in the refrigerator. So yeah, other than that, I don't think there's really. I did want to show you guys one thing. Which one am I going to share here? Just because I showed it to you guys last time and it wasn't working. But anyway, real quickly, what's new with Power BI? Not a ton. They're working on the direct query stuff and improving that for Power BI live data sets and tabular. We've got the Azure map visuals. The thing I thought was interesting, they added these bitwise functions. So these are more Excel functions that they've added into DAX. Now they added all those financial functions and all that. So all that work I did translating all those Excel functions to DAX was useless. Is what it boils down to, and a lot of switch performance improvements. But what I did want to show you guys was, so this is I remember the tool that I created, Microsoft hates Greg Quick measures. So it actually works now. So you can actually go in here and pick a column from a table, pick some function that you want, use SUMX and then generate, and then it'll generate the DAX code for that column or whatever that is, and then you hit create. Little more fail, and should create it back. What did I create? Table. So there it is. There's the measure that I created, sum of value 1 gamma. So basically, and you can create columns with it too, which I have most of the measures have. You can flip it between measure and column. So it actually is working. I'd call it pretty much alpha at this point, but I'm going to put in another. There's about 30 of these quick measures or so, and I'm going to put in another 30 or so that I had on books. And then the cool thing is Mike Carlo is working on a JSON definition for DAX measures. And so I'm going to start basing it on that. Right now, there's my own JSON file, a bunch of code behind for you to get each one of these to work. My coding is awful, by the way, because I just learned how to write C# WPF applications. But anyway, I'm going to actually start using that template so that in the future, you'll be able to use that same template for your own measures. So you can put in your own DAX code in that, and then they'll all load up here in this interface, and you'll be able to use the ones that are built in or your own custom set. Anyway, I wanted to show you that because it didn't work last time, but now it does.
What's the panic button here?
The panic button just takes out to the documentation, GitHub documentation, which tells you, how to use it, installation, and all that. Again, it's the worst interface. It's a garbage interface, and then the code is no better. I'm just going to get that out there. It does work.
That matters, right? That's what matters.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, I just wanted to show you guys that because I was working on that last time, and I actually got the thing working over a weekend. All right, that concludes everything. I'm going to start putting stuff away, and then whoever wants to meet me downstairs at Atlas Tavern, I can buy everybody a drink, and we'll conclude things.
Super cool thing.
Thank you, everybody remotely. Appreciate it,
And
and hope you guys have a good night.
is already a thing on some of Azure Data Factory and Synapse. It's called Managed Virtual Networks. So like basically it'll do a deployment that Microsoft makes of all these like services and it'll make endpoints to securely connect with